This is one of the most grandiose and disturbing theories in the Pokémon universe. The idea that Arceus created the Pokémon world not to give life, but to control humanity. Officially, Arceus is the original Pokémon, the creator of everything. According to the mythology of the game's Diamond Pearl legends, Arceus, it hatched from the primordial egg in the middle of nowhere, and then created Dialga, Palkia as space, Giratina, antimatter, banished to the reverse world. Then it created Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf, the guardians of mind, emotion, and will. So far, it sounds like standard mythology. But the theory says that all this is not just creation, it's architecture. The Pokémon world would be a carefully designed simulation, where each legendary has a function similar to that of an operating system. Dialga controls time, ensuring that everything runs smoothly. Palkia keeps space stable, limiting movement in reality. Giratina represents the threat of collapse, the system error. The three mental guardians keep humans and Pokémon emotionally controlled. Arceus, then, would be the supreme entity, who sees everything from the outside, not as a loving god, but as a programmer observing the characters of a game. And the scariest thing, almost no one in this world questions Arceus. It is treated as a myth, but at the same time it is accepted as absolute. It is as if the population was programmed to never go too far in the search for answers. This idea connects with the behavior of Ash and other protagonists. They face absurd dangers, but they never die, never really age, and seem to be on predefined missions. Everything is grand, but controlled, as if it were part of a script. And when someone breaks this cycle, as in events with the Ultra Beasts, or when Giratina appears, the world literally begins to destabilize. Portals open, physical laws break, Pokémon act unpredictably. The theory then states, the Pokémon world is not free. Arceus created everything to be an eternal experiment, where humans and Pokémon live in a perfectly controlled, emotionally stable, and religiously obedient ecosystem. All forms of free will are illusory. And the darkest part? Perhaps Arceus is not the creator of everything out of love, but the administrator of an artificial reality, and all the inhabitants of this world are just data, obeying an eternal script, without knowing, without escaping, without questioning. This theory says that Team Rocket isn't just a gang of criminals. It's a shadowy government operating in the shadows, with a lot more power than it seems. And when you start connecting the dots, things get serious. Officially, Team Rocket is a mafia group that steals Pokémon, mines resources, and tries to take control of the Kanto region. But if that's all it was, why would it be involved in genetic labs, espionage, control of advanced technology, and even cloning? It all revolves around Giovanni, the leader of Rocket. He's not just a criminal. He's also the leader of Kanto's 8th gym, which means he has legal authority and official recognition from the Pokémon League system. This is the equivalent of a crime boss being appointed as a military leader or governor, and no one in the game universe seems to question that. The theory says that Giovanni represents an archetype of a dictator, or totalitarian leader. He's rarely seen, but he controls everything. He commands the Rockets as if they were a secret national security force, infiltrating companies, laboratories, such as the one on Cinnabar Island, and scientific facilities. They are behind secret genetic experiments, such as the creation of Mewtwo, control of advanced technology, such as cloning machines, theft and trafficking of rare Pokémon, as if they were regulating the market, and direct intimidation of scientists and scholars, forcing them to collaborate. It is as if Team Rocket is manipulating the economy, science, and even the security of the regions, while the Pokémon League, which should combat this, simply tolerates or ignores it. This raises the suspicion that Rocket is not an external threat, but part of the system itself. In Pokémon Gold and Silver, even after Giovanni's fall, Team Rocket tries to reorganize itself, broadcasting secret messages over the radio to rally soldiers. This is reminiscent of terrorist cells, or extremist groups acting after the fall of a regime. as if the ideology still lives on. At its core, this conspiracy suggests that the Pokémon world is ruled from the shadows by an entity with more influence than any champion or professor. Giovanni isn't just a villain. He's the visible face of an invisible system that controls what people can know, capture, or discover. And if that's true, the trainers who think they're fighting for justice, maybe they're just playing Team Rocket's game. This theory is one of the most disturbing in the Pokémon universe, because it takes everything we know about Ash, the protagonist of over 20 years of anime, and turns his journey into a silent prison. The central idea is simple, but profound. Ash is trapped in an eternal loop, as if he were a character condemned to live the same story, with variations over and over again, without realizing it. And who would be controlling this? Arceus, or some other cosmic entity with absolute power over time, space, and reality. Think about it. Ash begins his journey at the age of 10, in 1997. More than 20 years have passed in the real world, but he has never aged. He has seen dozens of regions, hundreds of new Pokémon, changed teams countless times, met and said goodbye to several friends, but he always returns to the emotional and narrative starting point. He is defeated, comes back stronger, comes close to victory, but only manages to actually win much later. And even then, the structure restarts, the tone of the anime changes, the characters change, but Ash remains young, idealistic, tireless, as if time doesn't work for him like it does for others. The theory goes that this happens because Ash is being observed and tested, like an experiment. Arceus, being the creator of the Pokémon universe, or another cosmic entity, uses Ash as the centerpiece of an eternal cycle, perhaps as a way to maintain the balance between humans and Pokémon. Ash would be the point of stability, the variable that needs to be tested infinitely for the system to work. And everything reinforces this idea. Ash sees legendary Pokémon all the time, as if the universe was always trying to show him something. Each new beginning of the series, new region brings a slightly rebooted Ash, with the same spirit, but with no real memory of previous events. He never has any major permanent losses, never feels the weight of time, and is always ready to start over as if nothing had changed. Instead of living in a progressive timeline, Ash would be trapped in a controlled narrative cycle, as if he were a character in a game that never ends. And his role? Maybe it's to be the link between humans and Pokémon, or the symbol of perfect coexistence, a kind of guardian of harmony. The most disturbing thing about the theory is that Ash doesn't know. He lives each day believing that he's moving forward, winning, growing, but everything always comes back. The world revolves around him, but he never leaves the same place. In the end, the idea of Ash being trapped in an eternal loop transforms the anime's story from a journey of overcoming into a cosmic prison disguised as an adventure. This conspiracy is one of the most sinister and intriguing in the Pokémon universe. The idea that some Pokémon are in fact transformed humans, whether by curse, accident, or cosmic punishment. These creatures would be people who lost their human form, and now live trapped in monstrous bodies, and the game does not talk about this openly. Let's look at the strongest examples. Yamask. This is, without a doubt, the most direct case. The Pokédex of Pokémon Black states, each one carries a mask that represents its face when it was human. Sometimes, it looks at the mask and cries. This is not a metaphor. The description says that Yamask was once a living person, and remembers the life it had. It carries its funeral mask, its own face, and suffers because of it. It is a Pokémon with consciousness, pain, and mourning. In other words, a soul trapped in a Pokémon body. Kadabra. In the case of Kadabra, the Pokédex itself gives rise to the conspiracy. In Pokémon Fire Red, a boy with psychic powers woke up one day and turned into Kadabra. This is literally the story of a child who became a Pokémon. There is no explanation as to whether it was a curse, evolution, or accident. All we know is that he had mental powers, and one day he stopped being human. The bent spoon and glowing eyes indicate that he still has part of his original mind. The Pokémon Y Pokédex says, Phantump is said to be born when the spirit of a dead child enters a tree stump. Yes, this Pokémon is the ghost of a child, inhabiting an inanimate object in the forest. It still has a child's voice and seeks company, as if it doesn't know it's dead. It's a story of loss, but also of tragic transformation. Spirits and reincarnation. Several other Pokémon, especially ghost types, have stories tied to the human soul. Banette was a stuffed animal thrown away by a child and brought back to life out of pure hatred. Furslaus appears when a woman freezes to death on a mountain, and her spirit enters a body of ice. Oricorio, ghost form, is also referred to in some legends as the Dance of the Dead. These examples show that the boundary between humans and Pokémon is not rigid. The theory goes that the Pokémon world is an ecosystem where human souls can change form by choice, accident, or punishment. And perhaps some common Pokémon are people who have been lost to time and forgotten. The most disturbing thing? None of this is treated as something abnormal in the Pokémon universe. These beings continue to be captured, used in battle, stored in Pokéballs, even if they were once human. Ultimately, this conspiracy suggests that the Pokémon universe is darker than it seems, and that, on some level, all trainers are interacting with more than just creatures. They are dealing with fragments of human lives, trapped in bodies that no one fully understands. The theory that the Pokédex lies is one of the most disturbing in the Pokémon world. It is based on the idea that the information it provides is not entirely reliable, and perhaps is deliberately manipulated. In the games, the Pokédex is given to 10-year-old children, like Ash himself. These children are the ones who fill the device as they capture and observe Pokémon. In other words, the data comes from subjective and partial reports, and yet it is treated as absolute truth. This in itself raises doubts. But the problem goes deeper. Many of the descriptions in the Pokédex are simply absurd. Pokémon with bodies hotter than the sun, that fly faster than sound, that drag children to other dimensions, that devour souls. All of this is said naturally, but no one in the Pokémon world reacts as if it were real. It seems exaggerated, or an attempt to scare and impress, as if the authors wanted to shape people's perception. The theory goes that the Pokédex not only exaggerates, but also hides dangerous truths. It never explains, for example, the true origins of Pokémon like Yamask or Kadabra, which have clear evidence of having been human. It doesn't go into detail about the mental effects of being hypnotized by a Hypno or carried by a Drefloon. The statements are always vague, or softened, as if someone were selecting what can and cannot be revealed. The question that arises, who controls the Pokédex? It is always handed out by teachers who seem to act on behalf of some higher authority, perhaps the government, perhaps the Pokémon League. What if these institutions are using the Pokédex as an instrument of social control, teaching children from an early age what to fear, respect, ignore, or obey? In the end, the Pokédex may not be an innocent encyclopedia of data. It may be a carefully constructed tool to keep the Pokémon world under control. It doesn't inform, it shapes the minds of its trainers. And everything it doesn't show could be exactly what the system wants to hide.
This theory says that legendary Pokémon are not just powerful creatures. They are reality reprogrammers. And that changes between generations of games, such as new regions, characters, and even the laws of physics, are not mere script updates, but reboots of the universe itself, carried out by divine beings like Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina. Let's start with their roles. Dialga controls time. It can stretch, compress, stop, or restart the timeline. Palkia controls space. It distorts distances, alters dimensions, and can connect impossible places. Giratina represents antimatter and lives in the reverse world, a parallel reality that mirrors and distorts our own. Together, they form the fabric of the Pokémon universe. They are not just symbols, they are active agents. They do not just represent concepts, they are time, space, and chaos. The theory says that whenever a new generation of games begins, with new maps, new characters, and different rules, it is not just a narrative change. The universe is being reshaped by these Pokémon. It's as if the previous world had been reconfigured, like a game that was restarted, or a system that was rewritten by higher entities. The inhabitants of the Pokémon world don't notice anything. No one comments on the disappearance of old regions, nor does they find it strange that technologies that didn't exist before appeared. The rules change, the geographical boundaries change, and everything continues as normal, as if the previous events had never happened. This is very reminiscent of the idea of collective memory reset, a common resource in stories about simulated realities. And if someone remembers, the theory's answer is Giratina takes care of it. As the Lord of the Inverted World, he would be the agent that deals with the residues of the old versions of reality. What is no longer useful, what could destabilize the new universe, is sucked into the reverse world. Basically, this theory transforms the Pokémon world into a cyclical system controlled by divine entities that periodically reset reality without anyone knowing. And we, the players, only see the fragments, thinking we are playing something new, when in fact, we are seeing yet another phase of an infinite loop, rewritten by gods who act as cosmic programmers.
This theory completely changes the way we view the act of capturing a Pokémon. The central idea is that Pokéballs are actually soul prisons in disguise, and that the capture process is not physical, but spiritual. When you throw a Pokéball and the Pokémon is captured, it does not physically enter the device. It is converted into energy, a beam of light, usually red or white, and stored. This is not symbolic. In the games and anime, this happens before our eyes. The creature is digitized, dematerialized, transformed into something that is no longer an ordinary physical body. The theory says that this is, in fact, the conversion of the Pokémon's soul into controllable energy. The Pokéball would function as a spiritual container, capable of containing not only the material, but also the emotional and mental essence of the creature. What's more, once captured, the Pokémon no longer has control over its exit. It only appears when the trainer wants it to. This suggests suppression of will. You don't just store the Pokémon, you put it in a state of existential suspension. It neither lives nor dies. It waits, like a trapped consciousness, trapped in an energetic limbo that only activates when called. This would explain why no Pokémon clearly describes what it's like to be inside a Pokéball. They simply disappear from reality, and when they return, they obey. Things get darker when you think about ghost Pokémon. Many of them are the souls of humans or creatures with an awareness of the afterlife. Yet they are also captured, stored, and used as tools. The theory goes that capturing these Pokémon is equivalent to imprisoning conscious spirits, a practice that borders on necromancy. And the legendaries, divine beings, cosmic entities, creatures with the power to alter time, space, and dimensions, and yet you can throw them inside a little ball and keep them on your team. The theory sees this as the pinnacle of spiritual control. You're not capturing a body, you're subjugating a deity. Ultimately, this theory transforms the Pokéball from a symbol of friendship into a device of absolute domination, which converts a living being's soul into obedient energy, removing its freedom and identity. And every trainer, without knowing it, is participating in a system of control so elegant that it seems innocent, but it is total. Ultra Beasts are experiments from another dimension, or warnings. Ultra Beasts are said to be messengers from another reality, where life evolved in a completely different way. Or worse, they were created by a higher entity, as warnings that the Pokémon world is becoming unbalanced. They always appear after ruptures between dimensions, like glitches in existence. Ultra Beasts are, without a doubt, some of the strangest and most disconcerting Pokémon ever introduced in the franchise. And this theory goes beyond the idea that they are just exotic creatures. It says that Ultra Beasts are in fact interdimensional experiments or even messengers created by a higher force, as warnings that the Pokémon world is out of balance. In the Pokémon Sun and Moon games, they appear through ultra wormholes, dimensional rifts that tear the fabric of reality. These creatures come from a place called Ultra Space, an alien universe, with completely different physical and biological laws, and it starts there. They don't behave like normal Pokémon. They do not have a mythical origin like the legendaries, nor do they live with humans. The Pokédex does not know how to properly classify their natures. Each Ultra Beast receives a numerical code, UB01, UB02, as if they were weapons or objects, and not Pokémon with an identity. This leads to the theory that they are not natural products, but experiments perhaps created by an interdimensional intelligence, or even by Arceus or another higher entity trying to send a warning signal. They are biologically bizarre. Nihilego is like a glass jellyfish, but acts as a mental parasite, merging with humans and altering their emotions. Buzzwole is a muscular insect that looks like a caricature of exaggerated physical strength. Guzzlord devours everything around it, as if it were a living black hole. Xurkitree looks like a construction of electrical wires, almost mechanical. These forms are so disconnected from the Pokémon world that they seem like reality glitches, something that escaped from another simulation, or was injected here as a system error. The theory goes that they only appear when there are dimensional ruptures, as if they were automatic responses to failures in the universe. When the balance between time, space, and matter controlled by Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina begins to unravel, the Ultra Beasts emerge, not by accident, but as a reflection of this. Some believe that they are coded messages, as if a force beyond comprehension wants to say, "You have gone too far. The system is unstable." These creatures are the result. Others see the Ultra Beasts as what the Pokémon world could become if it continues to ignore the imbalances it causes, such as Pokémon abuse, genetic manipulation, cloning, and the exploitation of cosmic forces like Mewtwo or Eternatus. Ultimately, this theory turns the Ultra Beasts into echoes from another reality, or living reminders that the Pokémon world is not as stable as it seems, and that when the barrier between worlds breaks, what comes in isn't just strange, it's a consequence.